The Mystic Wanderer, a practical guide to mysticism with Stephen Weiss. Hi, welcome back to the Mystic Wanderer podcast. Today I want to talk about something that really helped me, and it's something that I want to give you to have. It's about purpose. And I think that everyone, when they know their purpose in life, so many things come in alignment. So many things are much better, I would say, from our experience of being a human being, to understand our purpose. But for a long time, and if you've listened to my other podcasts, you know that I had this problem where I was mostly a doing person, right? Where I found my identity, I grounded my existence in doing things, right? That's how I defined my existence, is what have I done? How many things are there to do? So just a lot of doing, and there wasn't really any presence or awareness or being, nor was I even really aware that those kind of concepts existed in life. So it was definitely something that I needed to learn about. So what I really ended up coming to is that we want to have two purposes in life to really keep us going, because a doing purpose is out of balance. But not only that, there are times in life where we can't do anything. And those are tough times, right? Those are times, well, for people like me, right? Some people are like, great, I can't do anything else, I'm going to go take a nap, But I, especially if there's a problem or a situation or I am uncomfortable, my reaction is to do something. And when I can't, it's very frustrating. But there is still a way to fulfill your purpose without doing anything specific. And I want to call that our being purpose. So we're going to talk about both of these things, having a doing purpose and a being purpose. So not only do you have purpose in life, but you have balance. Years ago, I was struggling with illness, which I still do to an extent. And I was in a used bookstore because a lot of my time was spent reading, because I was very tired a lot. I had what you would call chronic fatigue traditionally, or specifically, I called it adrenal fatigue, which I'll talk a little bit more later about. But I was in this bookstore and I felt like the Spirit of God was like, hey, go over to this bookshelf. Go buy this book. And of course, I'm curious. I'm interested. Okay, sure. What's this book that you want me to read? So I walk over to the shelf, and it's a used bookstore, and it's this book called God is My Success. And at that time, I was in the Christian tradition. I had a Christian background. So that's how I related to God. And I still relate to God through Jesus. That is how I personally identify my spiritual connection to God, through Jesus, but not so much in the traditional Christian church anymore. But I have found that I have expanded my connection to Jesus through the mystic practices and just time spent with God. But again, the mystic path has been in every major religious tradition, throughout history. So I think God is revealing herself through all of these different traditions, not just the one. I found this book and I was like, oh, this is interesting. What does it mean? And in fact, I found it. I went and got it. So if you're listening to the podcast, you can't see, but I'm holding up the book, God is My Success. And I'm not saying you need to read this or anything like that. I think it was, for me at another time, maybe over 10 years ago now. But the thing in here is there's a quiz, right? There's a quiz in this book. that tests your balance between doing and being, which I mentioned in a previous episode. And so I did the quiz, and afterward I saw I checked all the doing boxes and none of the being boxes, right? So I'm like, wow, I am out of balance, right? I don't even know how to be. I don't have the vocabulary or the concepts of being, right? I'm just defined by a doer. I forget who made the joke, right? Somebody said, we're human beings, not human doings, right? So, but so I realized that, and the way they presented the book was like, oh, you could be imbalanced the other way. You could be imbalanced with too much being, or not enough doing. So it's not like, I'm advocating only a being type of thing. In fact, this whole, episode is about doing and being. So I realized that it's about both. And at some point later, I had read when I was more ill years later, and I was reading a lot because that's one of the things I could do. And I read Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Right now, if you know about this, I'm going to just give you, again, maybe it could be a trigger warning for this, the material. I'm not going to get into anything graphic, but just the idea for it. But basically, Viktor Frankl was one of the Jews that was sent to a German prison camp, and since he was a psychologist, he decided that while he was there, he would try to learn something. So he tried to learn, because basically everyone there was under these extremely terrible, difficult circumstances, and many of them died. And he was trying to see what made the ones who lived keep going. Because it became obvious to him at some point, right? He didn't go in saying, I'm going to do a grand experiment. But it became obvious to him that the people who survived weren't necessarily like the physically strongest people or the obvious ones you would think, oh, they're going to make it, And he thought, well, what is it then? And he came to the conclusion that it was the people who had purpose. They still had something to do. Like, they were like, when I get out of here, I'm going to do something. I have something to do. And this purpose kept them going. And I read this book and I thought, wow, that's really powerful, right? And I felt a sort of a lack of purpose because, well, probably like many people, I hadn't sat down and written out my purpose or, officially confirmed it or, besides thinking, oh, my purpose is to be good to other people and follow God and things like that, but I didn't really have it so much concrete. And so I saw how important it was, right? I mean, purpose gives us strength and hope and a fulfillment in life, right? And you might be wondering, well, how does this relate to mysticism? Because in some ways, mysticism is about letting go and letting go of your ego. But that's why I'm talking about the dual purpose of this. And you're going to see, and this is something I talk about a lot, I refer to the observer and the dancer, right? The observer being the true self that observes and watches everything happen, watches your ego, watches your emotions, watches your thoughts, sees that there's a separation between you and all those things, right? And then the dancer is kind of like the wu wei, the effortless action, the part of you that acts without having all these layers of thought in the way, where you just go into the universe and you flow with it and you dance, right? And I often make the metaphor that whatever's happening around you and your experience is the music that is playing. And we can either go against it or we can dance along with the music, right? So really, as a mystic, the observer has the being purpose and the dancer has the doing purpose. So these things really do tie into the mystic life. So I was wondering, well, then what is my purpose? And I made the mistake, which I think a lot of us could make, where I was wondering too specifically, what is my purpose? God, what is it? To have this exact job and live in this exact place and do this exact, I was like looking for something very, very specific. And I wasn't really finding it, I couldn't figure it out. And It was a bit frustrating. And so I thought, well, what does it mean? What am I doing wrong? Well, at the time, eventually, I had recovered somewhat from my illness, and I was working on my documentary. So I made a documentary about adrenal fatigue. If you're curious, since I'm mentioning it, if you go to adrenaldocumentary.com, you can see my documentary. And the reason I made a documentary is because adrenal fatigue is a diagnosis that's not really believed in by Western medicine, medical doctors in the United States. And so it's hard to get treatment for it since they don't think it's real because there's not a specific blood test for it. So I assembled my own doctors and experts and an endocrinologist to talk about it, ones who do think it's a real thing. Maybe the name isn't so great, but that's not the topic we're talking about. The point is, in my research, a very helpful doctor invited me to these health conferences where there were hundreds of these doctors. And at the conference, I was interviewing people for the documentary. But in the meantime, I had a free pass to the conference. And so I went to listen to one of their speakers. He was a doctor, but a motivational speaker. And his name is Dr. Jack Tips. So he's in my documentary, and I'm also very grateful to him for helping me find purpose, because he was talking about purpose, but he presented it in a way that you didn't really have to know it that specifically, which was my exact problem, right? You can just go with, oh, okay, I have a general idea of this. Let's write this down and go, right? And so I was like, great, this is it. This is amazing. And I already knew, like, once he said that, it became obvious to me what it was. And it was sort of what I was already doing, right? I was there making this documentary on adrenal fatigue to help other people who have it, because they have the same problems as me. You go to the doctor and they say it's not real and it's all in your head, and here's some antidepressants, right? So I was doing that to help people. And so I realized, so for me, just to give you an example, right? My purpose was to use my skills to help other people, right? Because I've been given a number of skills for whatever reason. I, can make these videos. I can make I'm a filmmaker, right? I can teach. I can do things like that. So I decided that's why I'm doing this podcast right now, right? To fulfill my purpose. And it's not even like, I don't even know how many viewers I'm going to get or how many listeners or whatever. And that's not the point. I'm just supposed to do this, and that's why I'm doing it. And it's a very satisfying and peaceful feeling too, because it's not contingent on, oh, how many views am I going to get or anything, right? I know this is what I'm supposed to do, and it's satisfying in and of itself. So thank you, Dr. Jack Tips, for helping me figure out my doing purpose. But I didn't figure out until later about my being purpose. I realized, though, something felt like it was missing. There were a lot of times when I was having problems with the adrenal fatigue that I would get suddenly exhausted. It's interesting. It's in some ways it's like chronic fatigue, but in other ways you'll be fine for a few hours, and then suddenly you'll be immobile, and then you'll be fine again, and then you'll be immobile. And why? What's happening? And kind of tied it down to hormones, but the neurological system, the brain, HPA axis, all that kind of stuff if you're into medical things. But the point is, I would be not able to do anything, and I would get to the point, and I was too anxious to sleep, right? Because that's the other part of it. You have a lot of anxiety hormones, cortisol and adrenaline in your body, and it keeps you from sleeping. So I would just lay there kind of not able to do anything. And at some point I was getting a little better, and I had started to kind of volunteer to help with my nutritionist because I wanted to learn more about everything. So I was working with my practitioner to learn something called nutritional balancing. And I would be there at her office, and I remember I was there at her office, and then I was downstairs, and one of these fatigue spells hit me, and I just barely made it to the couch, and I was just laying on the couch, and I couldn't even tell them that I was there, right? I was unable to move or really even talk or anything. These would hit me for 20 minutes to 2 hours most of the time. I was laying there, and I started to complain to God. And I was like, God, why are you letting this happen to me? right? This is pathetic. I can't even move. I'm just stuck here. I don't have anything good to think about. Right now, life is very difficult. And I was complaining, which, may not be the best thing to do, but everyone's human, right? So, complain sometimes. I don't think there's anything wrong with complaining sometimes. I was complaining to God, who will listen, I believe. And guess what? God showed up. The room just filled with the presence of the divine. I felt it all around me. And God was just like, I'm here. I am here. And that was it. And it was wonderful and beautiful. And I didn't have to do anything. By accepting the love of God, by accepting the presence of God around me, I was fulfilling my purpose, my being purpose. And I think that in many cases, the being purpose for most of us is similar, and I'll talk more about that later, but I felt, there was nothing necessary for me to do to be accepted and loved and alive and fulfilling my purpose. And so it's a sort of a passive purpose in a way, but we can get in the way of that by worrying about it or trying to do something, or instead of happily accepting that existence of being where we just are. And at some point, later on, I remembered all this and I thought, oh, that's the missing piece, right? This is the other half of the purpose, because yes, there are times when we can't do something. And there's lots of reasons why we can't do things. We don't have resources. We don't have money or time, maybe, right? And I think sometimes we can get lost in trying to accomplish things or do things. And as being one who kind of got addicted to accomplishments at some point, I definitely felt that. And I want to say to you, this is sort of an aside that I'm thinking of now, is that the way I've lived for a long time, and I think it is sort of a mystic perspective, is that I realize I only have a certain sized sphere of influence. And really everyone's is different. And it's sort of, maybe we can't expand it, but in some ways it's just given to us. This is how much influence we have. And there's only so many things we can do, and so much time we have, so much energy. And carrying around a great burden for the world or the universe, trying to fix a big problem or a big issue, is bad for us because we can't. And I think if we're tied to a goal, like I want to fix this, we don't. But if we realize we have a small sphere of influence, then to fulfill our doing purpose is really just to watch, to be aware, keep your eyes open for what's in front of you. What does the universe place in front of you to do? Because there'll be plenty. And it should be obvious. Oh, here it is. There's a thing that I am equipped to do. I have the skill to do it. I have the time. I have the energy. I can do this. Right? And so you do it. And then, of course, some days will be lots full of hard work and some days won't. Right? And that's balance as well. But everyone's got your sphere of influence. So don't feel like you need to, whatever your purpose is, even if it's a very noble goal, or, you only have your sphere of influence, your power that you have. And leave the rest of it to the universe. Leave the rest of it to your Wu Wei, right? Trust in the divine that what you can't do will still get done. And of course, remember that in the end, ultimately, everything is all right. If we believe in a divine source, a ultimate wisdom, a Tao, a guiding God that is pervasive through the entire reality we experience, then we end up, especially through our practices, I believe, knowing that everything is all right. And so we can trust that. And that's a big place to get. But eventually, through your practices, through your awareness, trust that everything is all right. There are challenges, like Eckhart Tolle says, there are no problems, only challenges, right? And our job here, in one way, is the inner work, is working on the inside, because there is an infinite amount of problems to solve, right? There won't be an end to them. And one of the things that Alan Watts says that I found enlightening and humorous is that the business of politics is basically creating more problems. For every solution that politics tries to solve, they end up creating more problems. And it's just an endless cycle of problem after problem, right? No matter what political belief you subscribe to and you are active in, you're not going to create a utopia, right? And there's always unintended consequences. There are always things beyond our control. And it will always be this sort of conflicted mess. And it will always be in this version of reality that we are in now. In one perspective, it will always be unfair. And that's built into how things are. But it also gives us the opportunity in our sphere of influence to make things better for other people and ease their suffering. And one thing I was listening to Ram Dass recently, and he says, when you realize we're all one, and you see someone in front of you suffering, when you help their suffering, you actually are helping yourself. It doesn't make any sense to not help them, right? And so that's what I'm talking about, is keep that awareness open and look, oh, there's something right in front of me that I know I can do, right? And of course, there are times when we feel fear or hesitance. It's something that's outside our comfort zone to do, maybe, or say. That doesn't mean we still aren't supposed to do it in our purpose, right? And one thing that I've always said, and well, always, for a long time, I said that, for us, we are individually small little lights of consciousness floating around, and there are so many big problems and dilemmas and weaknesses in humanity and all that, and we don't have the answer to that. But all we have is the little bit that we can do, right? And that our existence is participating in that divine. There are problems, there is suffering, and we get to participate in that process of taking some of the suffering away, of making the world a better place, but only in our small way. And the thing is, and it feels, and it's very un-American, I think, too, to maybe very Western thought to think, but that God, the divine, doesn't need us to do anything. Everything is fine without our intervention, right? It kind of goes back to Wu Wei, which we talked about before, but it's really fine. You don't have to do anything. The world doesn't depend on you, right? You are not that important. And it's like, oh, how dare you say that, especially to an American, right? You're not important, what? In one perspective, right? Obviously, you are loved. You are part of the divine nature. You are a special creation that has consciousness, right? And you are part of the universal consciousness. But at the same time, we're just one out of, at this point, 8 billion people. And that's your share of the burden, is 1/8 billionth of it. So let that free you, right? It's not that big of a deal. Do what's in front of you. I believe, from my experience, that you will be satisfied by doing what's in front of you that your purpose brings to you. So, all right, let's do some work, maybe. You want to do some work? You can listen to this later. I don't want to do work right now. I'll play this later. We're going to talk about the practical way to find your purposes, both of them. Let's start with the doing purpose. And again, remember, this doesn't have to be too specific, right? If you try to make it too specific, you may not arrive on something. And of course, this is not about perfection or anything like that, right? Just you'll have a guide. This will give you something, right? This will give you a direction for your purpose, and you can revise it later. So to find your purpose, think about some things. Obviously, probably the most obvious one is, what skills do you have? What are you good at? What are you naturally good at? Right? So that's an intersection with some other things. Another thing is, what resources do you have? Physical resources, time resources, energy resources. What do you have, especially what do you have in abundance? What do you have a lot of that you can use as a resource, right? And also, what are you passionate about, right? Because how horrible would it be if we had this purpose that was just something we hated, or against our passions, or against our desires, right? So, but if you believe that, everything is one and everything is aligned, and that you can see that if you look at that, you see the bees and the insects and the plants, and you see all of nature, and you see how it's all woven together in this amazing dependence, and it just works, right? It doesn't need us to go out there and help, the flowers flower or the bees bee, right? It all does. So we're part of that, even though we've sort of lied to ourselves and separated ourselves from nature, we are nature. We're a part of that. So I believe that the things you're passionate about, things you care about, are built into that purpose. So look at your skills, look at your resources, look at what you're passionate about, and you should be able to come to your doing purpose, right? Now, I believe that in some way, this purpose will be bigger than yourself, right? It's not just to enrich yourself, right? That somehow it's going to contribute to the betterment of all consciousness, right? So all of the life that is around you. And once you do that, once you kind of write down this purpose, start turning on your awareness, right? Watch. You could almost say, like, open the third eye, right? If that metaphor helps you. Where you're watching, what is my way to fulfill this purpose? What is my way to fulfill my purpose today? What is the divine bringing in front of me that I need to do, that I am given to do as a gift, right? By the divine, to participate in the universe, right? That's our participation. It's what we're given to do. So you can also, as you're doing this, right, figuring things out, is use your spiritual guides. If it's not coming to you with just brainstorming, right? Go into meditation, go into prayer, however you talk to the source, the divine source, right? Do that. Spend some time with the source and talk to the source about your purpose, right? So I believe you'll get it. And you can ask, if you dare, ask your friends. What do you see? What do you think my purpose is, right? You might get some interesting answers. So that is the doing purpose, right? So you'll have that. And then the being purpose. Now, as I mentioned, the being is similar, I would say, to most people, where, you first of all have to be able to be, right? So you have to raise your skills in awareness, mindfulness, right? Understanding that you are not just this body, you are not your thoughts, you are not your emotions, right? You are this pure consciousness being. And so really your purpose is, in a very general way, to be connected to the divine and connected to everything else, which is the path of mysticism, right? So if you are part of everything, then the way to be part of everything is to raise your awareness of existence, of everything around us, of thoughts, of sights, of sounds, of everything, right? Because in a larger sense, everything is you, right? Even though I just said your thoughts aren't you, and all that, right? It's full of paradox. Mysticism is full of paradox, right? So in the one sense, you're not just, though, the edges of your body and your cells, and you are a part of this incredible nature system, and you're part of this consciousness that is connected to everybody. So in general, that's it, right? That's your being purpose, is to understand and be connected to, however you want to say it, the Tao, the source, right? For me, it was experiencing the love of God and really letting God love me and just accepting that without me having to do anything, right? Just be there and be loved, which was amazing. And so when I wrote it out, basically enjoy God every day. And I love this because really, since I, believe God is in everything and around everywhere, and also that it only makes sense that all the things that God has given us, like food and music, and right, there's not like, I love especially music, and Alan Watts talks about this, there's not really a goal to music, right? They're not trying to get to the end of the song, oh, let's hurry up and get to the end of the song because that's the what we need to do. It's just to play the music, right? There's not like, and music is so wonderful in that it just is, and yes, it's music. We love this, and then, we didn't have to be made to eat food, or if we did eat food, it didn't have to taste good and, all these things, right? But so I just see God in all these things, in food and music and entertainment and our sexuality, and even things just like simple pleasures, like how a breeze feels, and, like God is in all of that. And so for my purpose, the whole enjoy God every day, right, is to unashamedly and unabashedly allow myself to enjoy all of these things in existence that give me pleasure. All right. And it's not really, it's not really a hedonistic thing. It's just an allowing of, these are good things, right? These are all good. And, I can already hear like my old, my strict Christian upbringing, like, oh, those things, don't let them be an idol. Don't worship those things. And, it's such an old Western way of thinking, right? But, if you really know who you are in your place, you're not going to worship those things. Those are pleasures that exist, but those things exist because God gave them to us. So really, in effect, enjoying all those things is having an experience of God. And so if you have any guilt about enjoying any of these things, food, music, leisure time, games, fun, right? I want to encourage you to enjoy them to the fullest because they are actually part of our purpose. We were made to enjoy these things for a reason, and God gladly gave them to us, right? We, in a sense, are a reflection of God, and these things we feel are things God feels. So find a way for your being purpose to be, right? To be what you are and to accept yourself as, one of the things that'll help is accept yourself as a perfect creation. We're all part of this story, and we all have what the world would call flaws, but they're really just flavor that give everybody flavor. And then people are at different levels of awakening. And so some people are in places where they do things that some call evil because they don't understand they're actually hurting themselves, right, when they hurt others. But I want to free you. I want to say, hey, you are free to be, and you were made with purpose. And part of that purpose is just to be loved and participate in the universe by being there and even just observing the universe, right? As the observer, we talked about. That gives you purpose and meaning. So be there, right? I mean, if you think about it, sometimes you go to a show to see things, right? And you aren't really worried about yourself. You're watching someone else perform. You're listening to someone else play music. But sometimes you're listening to a friend, right? And they just want you to listen. And so you're there as an observer. And that's a good purpose, right? So, but observe yourself. Be good to yourself. Observe God in everything. When you start seeing God in everything and all these wonderful things in creation, in existence, in the universe. And, eventually there's the level above that, I would say, where you even see God in the sad things and the scary things, like, and you see it's all part of the one, which I know is hard to do, especially, I think, giving modern upbringings, but that's it. Like, so again, mine is just enjoy God every day. And so that means a lot. That one phrase means a lot to me, in terms of being. But I hope that you're able to, so with this, you're able to take this and get your doing and your being purpose. And then what I do is, every day, when I get up, I have a little thing on my computer that shows me my doing and my being purpose to remind me, so I can be aware of it. So what happens is, if once you have that being purpose, now you can be fulfilled even if you can't do things, which was one of the big things that I was missing, right? And really, all of this ties into different practices, the being especially, where if you're being, you're aware. You're aware of how to be. You're aware that being is a thing, right? So you're aware of being the observer, being able to distance yourself and watch your emotions, watch your thoughts, watch your ego wanting things, and understand that you're separate from that. And that gives you the ability to just be, because you can watch and then let it go, right? Whatever feeling or thought or emotion, you can be like, oh, okay, there's some anger, let that go, and you're still being. So these practices help. And then the doing is also great. We talked about Wu Wei, and also being the dancer, right? So, and the dancer is the one that dances along with the music of the universe. So your doing is also a practice where you're watching, you're using your awareness to watch what the universe is doing, and without overthinking it and labeling it and adding all these layers of meaning, you just do it. You just go with it, right? And it's spontaneous action, but it's spontaneous right action in the sense that it's flowing with the universe. And so when you are doing, do it with everything you are, right? Totally be that experience. Be your doing, right? It's interesting. These are really kind of the same thing, but just different sides of a coin. Do your being, and be your doing. And when you do it fully. And when you are existing, when you are being, allow that without any guilt or judgment. And just be, and feel that acceptance of the universe. And it doesn't matter all these flaws and stuff that your body or your ego has, because you are a true, beautiful, pure consciousness. And you are meant to be exactly what you are, and meant to go through challenges, and meant to experience all of the range of emotions, but all underneath that you are divine. So you're able to let go of guilt and judgment and just be. So what we're talking about here is purpose, but not perfection. This isn't like a goal we're trying to accomplish, right? And in fact, you don't need to do this at all. This isn't something you have to do to even follow the mystic path or anything. And most of the stuff I talk about isn't, right? Because again, everything is actually fine all the time, right? And the more you practice, the more you're aware of that. So you don't have to do anything, right? You don't have to specifically do anything. But if this speaks to you, then, and you want to write down your purposes, I think it will help you. So purpose, not perfection. And it's not an achievement, right? So you can think of it as a guide, like a light in the distance that you follow. And also it can be a place for you to rest. You can rest in your purpose. Besides being and doing, there's also transformation, right? So this is a path to transformation, where as you live each day in your purpose, you will become more and more aligned with everything, right? With the universe and with the divine, by understanding your purpose. It also will help in terms of your relation to other people, right? And when you're solid in your purpose, right, you can help others more effectively. The observer and the dancer are both you, right? And you have a purpose for your observer, a being purpose, and a purpose for your dancer, the doing purpose. So if you feel like you want to do this, take some time do some brainstorming, get out a notebook or open a Word document, spend some time in meditation, prayer, talk to the divine source, possibly talk to your friends. Enjoy this, right? Again, don't take anything too seriously, right? We are just little tiny people on this little planet, but we're also connected to the divine, and we are divine creations, and it's already okay. So enjoy, have fun finding your purpose and understanding where the divine already wants to take you and where you're going to go in this life. And don't attach any judgment to it or guilt or performance. You already are exactly who you're meant to be. So all this is just an awakening. It's a seeing, it's a visioning to bring you closer to the actualization of that amazing divine consciousness that you already are. The Mystic Wanderer